There are debts that never show up on paper, no interest rates, no contracts, and yet they trap you for life. I used to think my mother was unstoppable, a Mexican woman living in California, working 3 jobs a day, yet somehow still coming home to cook dinner, still saving enough to put me through college. To me, she was a superhero, a woman who never complained, never cried, until the day I found out she was carrying a massive debt. Not for herself, but for my brother, the same brother who once held a knife to our throats, demanding money for his next fix. Worse, she'd taken out the loan under my name. I remember that moment like it's burned into me, sitting in the bank, clutching the notice, my hands shaking. Not from anger, but from heartbreak. That was when I realized sometimes what destroys a family isn't poverty, it's love, placed in the wrong hands. I was the youngest daughter in my family, while my older brother Miguel was the child nobody dared to mention. I was always the hope. My mother used to say, God gave me you as a miracle, so I'd still have a reason to endure. When I was little, I thought those words were sweet. Later I realized they were whispered out of pure exhaustion. Miguel had once been a bright kid, but after my father left, he grew silent, then angry. He dropped out of school, fell in with gangs, and by 17, he was in juvenile detention. Every time Miguel got arrested, my mother borrowed money for his bail. I remember once, she sold her wedding ring, the only thing left from her broken marriage, just to pay a lawyer's fee. I asked her, "Why do you keep saving him?" She whispered, "Because if I don't, who else will?" My life, and the invisible burden I got into college with scholarships and by working part-time at the library. Mom couldn't help much, but she always slipped a few wrinkled bills into my wallet whenever I came home. She never spoke about money, never complained, never begged. When I graduated and landed a job at a tech company, I felt proud. My salary was enough to live comfortably. Finally, I thought I could repay my mom, help her finish the paying off the old house, the house that had raised me. So I went to the bank. I asked to check the status of her mortgage. She still used her maiden name, Isabel Rivera. The clerk frowned at the screen and asked, "Do you want to review just Isabel Rivera's loans, or also the linked accounts?" "Linked accounts?" I asked. She turned the monitor around. Under co-signer, I saw my name, Laura Rivera. Me, a $35,000 credit line. Then another, an $80,000 personal loan, all tied to me. I fell back into the chair, the paper trembling in my hand. The confrontation I didn't drive straight home. I circled the strip mall where Mom always hunted for discounts, replaying one question over and over. Why? When I finally walked into the kitchen, she was stirring a pot of beans. I stood in the doorway, voice breaking. "Mom, you borrowed money under my name?" She froze, didn't turn, didn't deny it. I threw the statements onto the table. "Why would you do this? Why didn't you ask me first? Why?" She just shut off the stove, wiped her hands on a towel, then sat down and buried her face in her palms. "I'm sorry, Misha." Her voice cracked like crumpled paper, fragile, barely audible. That night, we sat in the living room, silence pressing down like we were both drowning. She finally spoke. Since Miguel got out, he'd changed. He told her he wanted to open an auto shop, said he just needed one chance. And I couldn't let my son go back to his old ways. He promised me, Laura. He promised. So she drained her savings and then borrowed under my name because my credit was good and because I wasn't using it anyway. I didn't think you'd ever find out. I thought I'd pay it off before you knew. Then she whispered the words that broke me. He's my blood, Laura. My son. I turned away so she wouldn't see me cry, not out of sympathy, but because I knew the chance she gave him was a bottomless pit. The truth about Miguel 2 days later, I drove to the rundown motel where Miguel was staying. The door was unlocked. The stench of cigarettes, booze, and something rotten hung heavy in the air. Miguel was sprawled on the sofa, eyes bloodshot, surrounded by the wreckage of the auto shop Mom had believed in. I shouted, "Mom gave you everything. She went into debt under my name. And you?" He smirked. "She chose that. I never asked her." He leaned forward, his grin sharp. "And you? You think you're noble? You just want to be the good daughter so you can sleep at night." His words hit harder than any slap. I walked out, didn't look back. And in that moment, something inside me died. That night, I came home and found my mother sitting at the dining table. No lights, only the dim glow of a dying candle, like something gasping for its last breath. She was holding a piece of paper, a credit card bill, $2,437. I looked closer. It was for rehab fees, for Miguel. I didn't say a word, just pulled out a chair and sat across from the woman who gave me life, and also placed me in a debt with no voice. "Do you think I can still trust you?" I asked. My voice wasn't sharp. It didn't tremble. It was just empty. She looked at me, her eyes like a frozen lake, still, cold, but impossibly deep. "I know I was wrong," she whispered. "But do you know? Miguel once tried to kill himself. My son hung himself with an extension cord in the backyard. If the neighbor hadn't seen him in time..." She stopped. Her voice snagged, like thorns lodged in her throat. I just thought, if I gave him a reason to live, maybe he would change. I wanted to scream, to tell her it wasn't her fault, that it was his, Miguel's, for not valuing the salvation she kept handing him. But I couldn't, because deep down, I was afraid that one day, she'd look at me with that same gaze, the look of someone slowly losing their last hope. I stood up, took a check from my wallet, $10,000, my first real savings. I slid it across the table toward her. "Use this to cover the interest. For now. I'll figure out the rest myself." She broke down crying. No sound. Only the paper in her hands growing wet with tears. I had never seen my mother cry like that, as if she wasn't the strong Mexican mother I had always known, but just a small, exhausted woman, trying desperately to keep a collapsing family from falling apart. That night, I lay in bed, eyes wide open. I saw myself as a child again, riding on the back of her old bicycle, arms wrapped tight around her waist, believing she could take me anywhere safe. But now I understood. It wasn't that she didn't want to protect me. It was that she had nowhere left to run. A week later, I sat in a financial advisor's office. I had decided to restructure the debt under my name, to accept it as part of my life, like a scar that couldn't be erased, but could be carried. I didn't tell my mother. She thought I was still angry, but the truth was, I was learning how to forgive without needing an apology. Miguel never went to rehab. He disappeared, like a trail of smoke. My mother stopped mentioning him. She didn't cry. She just began watering her plants every morning. She started reading cookbooks, even though she'd never tried a new recipe in her life. And I realized she was learning how to live without placing her entire heart into one person. One evening, as I was washing dishes, she came up quietly, as if afraid to drop something fragile between us. "Laura," she said softly, "do you know, there are some investments you know will lose, but you still make them, because it's the only way to hold on to what's left of your family." I turned to her, nodded, no accusations, no tears, just finally understanding the price love sometimes exacts in dollars. I no longer believe money solves everything, but I do know this: without it, we're quicker to lose each other. And some wounds can only be healed by honesty, not by silent sacrifice. Have you ever forgiven a debt that was never really yours? Or sacrificed your finances for a bond that carried nothing but risk? Share your story in the comments. And if you've ever heard whispers like these, Whisper of Money will always be here to listen and to tell them with you. Our lives can never be separated from money. Some dollars bring joy, happiness, and laughter, but others break families, dim love, and leave behind tears, sometimes even more than that. Though we've never met, here we sit side by side in silence, listening, sharing. Your story, my story, and the lessons left behind by every choice we've made. Subscribe to this channel if you believe that by simply listening to one another, we're already a little closer. Thank you for watching.